Oh, Joe Douglas, you dog you. The New York Jets trade for Haason Reddick. I want to go over the trade compensation, the production, the contract, the impact on the roster, and the NFL draft.
Jets, Jets, Jets!
All right, boys and girls, I'm excited to get into this one. The New York Jets trade for Haason Reddick. This is a big-time move for the New York Jets. I want to go over all the impacts from the trade compensation, the production, the value of the contract, the impact on the roster, and what it means for the NFL draft. So without further ado, let's hop into the trade compensation. This coming by way of Adam Schefter. The Eagles are sending edge rusher Haason Reddick to New York Jets for a conditional 2026 third-round pick that could become a second-round pick, sources tell ESPN. The 2026 conditional pick becomes a second if Reddick plays 67.5% of the snaps and has 10 or more sacks. The "and" is playing a massive role in this entire sentence right here, because initially when I saw this, I was like, okay, well, the snap percentage, that might be a little bit far-fetched for him to achieve, but the sack percentage, Bryce Huff got 10 sacks last year. I consider Haason Reddick a better edge rusher, and we're going to have a better offense to boot, so you would think more edge rushing opportunities and pass rush opportunities for Haason Reddick. But the "and" implies you need both those conditions to hit for this to become a second-round pick. So by comparison, our defensive line rotation, Quinnen Williams had the most percentage of snaps at 69%, and then you have Jermaine Johnson at 66%, and then it goes down from there. So realistically, I'm not expecting Haason Reddick to play 67.5% of the snaps, even though his last few seasons, the last 4 seasons, he's played 79, 83, 74, and 74% of the snaps. So those were in different systems. The New York Jets, with Robert Saleh, we're going to be rotating edge rushers constantly throughout the course of a game to keep our guys fresh. So I think Haason Reddick's going to hit one of those marks. I think he could easily hit 2, but I think he's only going to hit the 1 because we're going to keep his snap count artificially lower. So Joe Douglas, this was a great addition to that trade. Hopefully one of the underwriters is like, I'll get you right now. No or there, it's only going to be and. So the Jets save themselves a little bit in terms of what they could be giving back in 2026. And remember, this is 2 picks from now. So, or 3 drafts from now, right? Like we have 2024, 2025, 2026, 3 years from now. The Eagles, if they had just let Haason Reddick leave, they would have gotten a compensation pick in 2026 either way. So I would imagine Eagles fans probably aren't too thrilled with this particular trade. Now, the Jets could, in theory, let him walk after the season and recoup a compensation pick for the same draft. So we'll get into that conversation when we get to the contract side of things. But the trade compensation-wise, for the value of the snaps you're going to wind up getting and the amount of sacks you think you're going to be getting from him as well, I'm totally happy with this trade compensation. No issues whatsoever there. From a production standpoint, lots of things to get into. The pass rush win rate. According to ESPN Analytics, look at Haason Reddick and Bryce Huff just sitting right there, right 7 and 8. R.I.P. 𝐀𝐿 Clowney. Thought that was going to happen. Did not happen. But look, you look at the pressure percentage, right? 22% pass rush win rate for both Huff and Reddick. Double team 1% more in favor of Reddick. Obviously played far more snaps than Bryce Huff did. So with elevated snaps, could Bryce Huff have had the same type of impact as Reddick? Maybe. We'll never know until we see, I guess, Huff play in the Eagles system this upcoming year. But either way, the Jets basically got a copy-paste sort of situation from a win rate perspective in regards to Bryce Huff and Haason Reddick. Now, where they do differ is some of their early down percentages. Haason Reddick played 70% of the early down reps, where Bryce Huff only played 30%. So when you're considering Bryce Huff's inability to play the run, or the Jets' maybe inability to, or inopportunity, they didn't want to have him on early passing or on early rushing downs because he was a little bit more of a liability. And here, not to mention, the get-off rate, faster than Bryce Huff. Average time to pressure, faster than Bryce Huff as well. So in a situation where he needs to react to potential run plays, Haason Reddick is significantly better than Bryce Huff when it comes to that. Now, as far as pressure rate, obviously Huff is pretty pretty high. Now, maybe that's just because he's pinning his ears back and going after the rusher regardless on an early down, and he's not playing the run like a Reddick is. But either way, I'm totally happy to swap out a little bit of that efficiency on early downs to give us a little bit more of a well-rounded player right there. As far as double-digit sack leaders the last few years, the last 4 seasons, Haason Reddick and Myles Garrett are in a league of their own. Only 4 players have over 10 sacks over the last 4 seasons. Look at that company. Micah Parsons, 3. Nick Bosa, 3. TJ Watt, 3. Trey Hendrickson, 3 seasons. Haason Reddick, Myles Garrett, that's some good company keep right there. Now, maybe some concern that you may have was the final 5 games of his season. They played the Seahawks, the Giants twice, the Cardinals, and the Bucks, and he only had 11 pressures, no sacks, and 3 stops. So he did kind of disappear a little bit towards the end of last season. Was that maybe some tension with a looming contract dispute? Was it just the Eagles season sort of kind of falling apart towards the end of the year? They did lose, I believe it was 4 of the last 5, if I'm not mistaken. So could that play a factor in it? Either way, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more production out of this point in the season for him. Now, maybe with less reps, maybe you're going to see some more production towards the tail end of the season. Maybe that has something to do with it. But either way, the production is still pretty good overall for Haason Reddick. In terms of the contract, this is a 1-year contract. I'm seeing a little bit of conflicting reports. Over the Cap has it at 1 year, $15 million. I believe that to be the actual accurate contract because he's got a $14.25 million base and he has a few options in there. And it sounds like the roster bonus is going to be paid out by the Eagles. So there's like a $1 million that could have made it 16. So I think $1,015,000 is correct. Apparently, the Eagles offered him $18 to $20 million on an extension. So this could be a 1-year rental for the New York Jets unless they try to extend him beyond this year. But he's commanding $25 million like Danielle Hunter just got. So there is maybe some concern over how much you're going to be willing to pay him versus what you were willing to potentially pay Bryce Huff. Because when you look at Bryce Huff's contract, he signed with the Eagles, 3 years, $51 million. His cap hits over the next few years, $4.3 million, $7.5 million, $11.7 million, and then he has a void year with a dead cap of $27.5 million, so the Eagles would have to extend him at that point or just eat a really big cap hit after those 3 years. So you might be saying, why didn't the Jets re-sign Bryce Huff and lower his cap hit? Because you're talking 3-4 times lower than what Reddick's contract is right now. And from a cap perspective in a win now year, you might say, well, that would make a whole lot of sense. But it takes 2 to tango. And realistically, the best way for the Jets to have re-signed Bryce Huff was using the franchise tag, which would have been a higher cap hit than what we actually got for Haason Reddick. Now, you could be arguing, well, if we tagged and traded him, at least you get an asset for Huff, and then you still wind up making a trade for Haason Reddick. And maybe there's a little bit of hidden stuff here because the Eagles were possibly going to be hit with some tampering charges by the New York Jets, and the Jets needed an edge rusher, so maybe Joe Douglas, Howie Roseman, a little bit of connection from former coworkers. Maybe they said, hey, let's not worry about it. Let's send Reddick over there for a little bit less so we don't have to deal with the compensation that we're going to be losing right now. This is a win-now move, so even though the cap hits for Huff's contract are lower, they wouldn't have been that on the New York Jets because I don't think he would have signed this deal with the New York Jets realistically. But still, maybe a little bit of a concern from a 1-year contract. This is definitely a win-now mode, so maybe there's a situation where the Jets decide to add a bunch of void years onto the end of his contract that drops Reddick's value from a 1-year, $15 million cap hit for this season to maybe something a little easier to swallow without needing to commit further on beyond, 2025, 2026, when you might need to re-sign some of your younger players, potentially. Or do you lock them in? 29 years old. Edge rushers can still last for a pretty long time. I mean, you see Von Miller still, playing off the edge real well. I think Brendan Graham's pretty old as well, and he's played long into his Eagles career at that point. So maybe the Jets are thinking re-signing Haason Reddick here. We'll see in the coming days. I'll update that in the description down below or in the first comment if something happens, and I'll give you my thoughts on that as well. As far as from a roster perspective, what does that mean for the New York Jets? Well, the biggest part for me is John Franklin Myers. John Franklin Myers is due $16.3 million on his contract or cap hit for this year. Do we see a restructure from him bringing that cap hit down? Do we see maybe an extension potentially? Or do we see a trade or a cut? I would say now that you have Reddick on the field, it lessens the need for a John Franklin Myers. So if you need that cap space and JFM is not playing ball with trying to drop his number for this season, you could wind up moving on, and I think you could fulfill an interior defensive pass rusher, maybe like a Javon Kinlaw who's already on the roster. Maybe that's where they kind of see it if JFM is maybe kicking a little bit more inside. I would like to bring JFM back. I don't really want to see him go, but at $16.3 million, I can totally understand the maybe not wanting to pay him that particular amount of money. In terms of what this means for Will McDonald, I think it means he might not quite be ready. I think if you have a lot of confidence in Will McDonald heading into the season, I'm not so sure you make the trade for Reddick. Now, you could argue this is just loading up on edge rushers anyway, and for the cap space, you're going to generate more negative plays with Reddick versus, whoever else you would have brought in, and just learning from Haason Reddick is going to go a long way for both Jermaine Jefferson and for Will McDonald. So I don't know if this is necessarily a damning indictment on McDonald, as much as it maybe highlights or shows just how much it might have been a misuse of draft allocation or misuse of resources potentially last year. That's kind of how a lot of Jet fans feel. And I would feel, maybe there's a little bit more of that right now, but I'm not too concerned. I like Will McDonald as a player. I think he's going to be a good player long term. It's just, maybe a little bit sour, but there's going to be a lot of pass rush reps potentially coming around because we don't have Carl Lawson. We don't have Bryce Huff. I don't know how many pass rush snaps you necessarily want Michael Clemens getting when you have all these other really good edge rushers. So if you have a cycle of 3 guys going in, maybe not as big of a concern with Will McDonald. As far as versatility is concerned, Haason Reddick can flex out to play linebacker. He came into the league as a linebacker with Arizona. Then he switched his final year in Arizona to full-time edge rusher, and that's when the sacks really started to explode, and he really started to show out just how good he could be in the NFL. As a linebacker, you could have him around the line of scrimmage. Maybe that means the Jets are going to have 5 guys near the offensive line of scrimmage, and you have the ability to drop Reddick into maybe covering a tight end or covering a running back, like almost like, I'm losing the linebacker that we had 2 years ago from the 49ers. Quan Alexander, there it is. Maybe some type of role similar to that with a higher end edge rush presence from Reddick. That maybe with the hip drop tackle being banned, maybe that is something you want to consider a little bit stronger. Or maybe you're playing him in that will capacity where well, I guess that is the will capacity. But either way, I like the flexibility that he can go out in coverage, provide a little bit of help, and the offense doesn't know who's coming. If you decide to drop him back after being like a zillion sack edge rusher the last few years, this is something that I think cannot be overstated. If you cause the quarterback on the other team or a defender or an offensive lineman to think a split second longer, that's the difference between winning your pass rush rep and winning the down on any given play. So I really love that. They don't know who's coming. I think that is a huge, huge addition to the New York Jets. And as far as first rounders, the Jets are just stacking first round talent in this offseason. Tyron Smith, Mike Williams, Javon Kinlaw, and now Haason Reddick, all former first round picks to go along with a bunch of first round picks we already have on this team. On the defensive side alone, I mean, off the top of my head, Solomon Thomas, Quinnen Williams, CJ Mosley, like lots of first round talent. And first round talent, that pedigree is there for a reason. The same thing we see with college prospects when they have, 4-star, 5-star recruits. That sort of translates, and then you just have to have the coach and the scheme and everything else kind of like working around it. So I like the high pedigree that the Jets are bringing in here because it shows high upside. And if there's one thing the Jets have figured out how to do, at least on the defensive side, is how to get the most out of your talent. So I really like this for the New York Jets. And in terms of the draft, what could this potentially mean for the New York Jets? What does this mean? What does it mean? Well, it means this is a win now move, which has me questioning how much are the Jets really going to invest into the offensive line. And I'm not opposed to drafting offensive line at 10. You guys know where I stand on this. Guard tackle flexibility is something that is incredibly valuable given the health concerns potentially of AVT and of Tyron Smith. Morgan Moses, $5.5 million contract. He could potentially be a backup or maybe having some concerns with the shoulder surgery. I think there's a whole lot to like about going offensive line. But in a win now window where you're saying we have to win one of these next 2 years, it would make a lot of sense to draft a player that's going to see the field immediately and someone who could get open very quickly in the event the offensive line is not necessarily up to snuff. So could it be a wide receiver? Could it be a trade up for someone really polished like a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a Malik Neighbors who just ran 4.3 at his pro day? Absolutely bonkers. Or do the Jets sit and pick at number 10. Now, I still feel like trade down is the best option for the New York Jets, but if you're sitting there at number 10 and you have to make the selection for someone that's going to be an impact player this year, the Jets have been looking for a home run threat. I've been saying this for a while. Last year, they were tied to Jahmyr Gibbs during the draft. When the Jets already have Breece Hall under contract, it would be very surprising to see them take a running back that high, but that is a home run threat. They also had Michael Mayer on their draft board just behind Will McDonald, which implies they're looking to improve the tight end room while also looking for a home run threat. So to me, I think Brock Bowers is definitely going to be the pick at number 10 if the Jets cannot trade down. I'd be a little surprised if we went a different, I shouldn't say surprised. I'm not going to be surprised with any direction that we go, but based on some of the moves that they're making and some of the strengths that we might be looking for, Brock Bowers seems to hit a lot of the positives here, even though he's like by far the most polarizing player that the Jets could potentially draft in the first round. So guys, I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on the NFL draft, the impact of this trade? What does it mean going forward into this season? And I'll leave you with this. What does Quinnen Williams think of Haason Reddick?
I think he should be in that Defensive Player of the Year category. I think he's one of the best pass rushers in this league.